Wake up, buyer payer people. It's a beautiful day. Go grab yourself another cup of joe and say hello to Jim and Michelle Rhoads on the Buy Here Pay Here Morning Show. Take it away, you two.
It's Monday, right?
It's Monday, and we did like a time change.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday.
So supposed to gain an hour. So why do I feel so beat up?
I don't know.
What happened?
Okay, so I was thinking about this last night, and I don't remember. I'm sure I learned it in a history book, and I know that there's this thing about not ever doing the time change again. Why did we start it?
I hear different things. I think it was back in the day when they had energy savings in mind. Like that's what
Okay.
yeah.
Because it's I could see something like helping the kids walk to school more in the daylight, that kind of stuff. But I think it happened before kids actually did that
I
whole
don't even know.
having
the only thing I've heard was about energy consumption.
well, if anybody knows. Yeah. Because it's
Google.
like one of those things that will keep me up at night. Not.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But it was a good weekend.
Yeah.
I did a lot of decorating and nesting and drove my husband crazy, but it looks nice. So
it's okay. It is nice. She's done a beautiful job.
Yeah.
She's great at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So our viewers, I'm sure, are looking for a football update from the weekend.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So
Jim's alma mater.
Yeah, my school won. Oklahoma State knocked off Oklahoma.
And the last bedlam that they
game
have scheduled
for the foreseeable future. So it's good to have.
I'm
that
sure
little
they'll
bit
do
of
another one just as like an extra game somewhere here or there, but not on the official schedule.
That'll at least help to shake off some of the bitterness of getting beat 80% of the time in that series. But
it was a good game.
It was a great game. Great.
Yeah. We had friends over on Saturday. And so I went out on the patio and was just sitting with the wife of our neighbors, and she's like, "So does Jim like really watch the game, or does he just like kind of watch the game and talk to people and all of that?" And I'm like, "My husband watches."
Oh yeah.
And he's like breaking down all of well, they've improved here and they've improved there, and that was an interesting play, and all the stuff. And so I enjoy watching college football.
I love it.
He loves
I love it. And
yeah.
there's a mental aspect, as I've told you, that the mental part of sports is the part that's always most interested me. And watching that team this year, there's been a big shift. There's kind of a business lesson in all that too. So
we'll bring more of that out. But you were talking about Tommy's
team won. The Philadelphia Eagles knocked off the Dallas Cowboys last evening, and so he's got to be pleased about that.
Yeah.
Puts his team in a good position in their division.
Yeah.
And let's see who else from around the Buy Here Pay Here world. And I saw that Terry McCauley's Notre Dame Fighting Irish came up a little short because Clemson finally decided to play football, and they showed up and beat his Fighting Irish. That was apparently a good game. A lot of good football this weekend. A lot of teams were tested, so it'll be an interesting stretch.
That is. It's a fun time of the year.
Yeah,
football.
For sure.
Football season. It also means changing of the colors and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Karen, I need a puppy.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole conversation.
It is
that we thank you, Karen. I love dogs. I really do. I'm not a dog parent though. Yeah. And there's a huge difference. Jim just teases me when I see someone walking a dog. I will, "Hi, buddy," and get down and love on him and scratch him and all of that. And then I send them on their merry way. Yeah. I will dog sit. And after 2 days, I'm like, "When are your parents coming back?"
Yeah.
So yes, just for photo ops.
Right.
And like while Jim's watching football, I'll go. Someone needs to do like a rent a dog for a day, so you can just rent a really cute dog.
I like dogs. I'm at a point in my life when I'm not prepared to accept the responsibility. So that's all. I like my freedom, my flexibility to move about.
Yeah. Well, and that it does cause. I used to work for a company. The founders were in Boston and I lived in Utah at the time, and they would fly me out to their house. I would house sit, watch their dogs, and it was in Washington, D.C. So that's a vacation for me. It's saving them a little bit of money from having to put the dogs in when they would do their annual trip to like St. Thomas or something. And got to go see all of Washington, D.C. that way. But George Spat watching golf.
Talking about golf. Probably was a mental collapse. I didn't see it, George, but that's the fascinating part of sports for me is the mental element. Can you power through? Can you keep it together? So anyway, good stuff. So shall we get to our topic of the day?
I think that's a great
idea. We're kind
of
stepping into tricky waters here with kind of skirting on the edge of some legal stuff. And we're not offering legal advice over here. We're not attorneys, but we have something to share today. And I'll tell you, before you share the document, I can to kind of share where this came about. We're seeing a lot of threads on social. Obviously, we had the conversations recently on the broadcast after the poll that we did about our dealers. Are you clamping down on customers? Are you being more flexible? I'm a big believer in everything that we train and teach. With our work, we really emphasize clear understanding. Can be super
strong
flexible.
Fences.
You can always replace the understanding with a new understanding, but I like things in writing. I like to have a super clear understanding. And also like to work with people. It's what we certainly recommend. I just know from having been a dealer myself that there comes a point where you've gone as far as you feel like you can go. And so what we're going to talk about today is a form called a notice of strict compliance, which you need to run by your attorney in your state. You know me, I don't use the word need very often, but this is a kind of a have to. These things can be state specific, and some places you would be permitted to do this. Plus, I've complicated this one by kind of combining two things into one, and got my attorneys okay back when I was a dealer to do this in my particular state. But it's like we just are starting to. There's ways to clamp down on customers.
Do you want to talk about what notice of strict compliance is?
It's basically serving a customer notice that regardless of what our practices have been in the past, that we're serving you notice, like typically certified mail or DocuSign or whatever. We're serving you notice that we're going to start enforcing the contract differently. Because I think you and I touched on this once before. Is when we make a decision to shift and just kind of decide one day to start enforcing more strictly, we really are now we're definitely treading in some dangerous water.
Can you do that for one and not for all?
Yes. I mean, at least again, I'm not an attorney over here, but
can
in my
you do
case,
it for one if you're letting others do the same thing that you're asking them to stop?
It's basically you're changing the practices with this customer, and you're just serving them notice that you're not going to tolerate the delinquency anymore. I mean, we'll show the language, but it basically says we're at the end. We've tried everything. We've made a decision to enforce your contract strictly. So we're serving you notice that we're changing.
So it's not just like, boom, you get your car repoed. It's like we've tried to work and now we're sending out this thing by certified mail that says, hey, we're going to hold you to this.
It can also be as a condition of repossession. I mean, I always used to say in the matter of repossession, like, I would use the phrasing if I was involved in the conversation with a customer. We train managers to say, look, this isn't baseball. We don't get 3 strikes. If we find it necessary to repossess your car again, you would not get it back. So if you think about now, in the context of allowing a customer to redeem the repo,
that's another great poll question we should put out there.
Oh, yeah?
How many of you let your customers redeem a repo?
Good. You're going to make a note?
I
won't remember.
I will make a note.
Yeah. So that's definitely a good poll question, because repo redemption is, we know that repos are, and I find this language sometimes is interesting in our space. Like some people talk about repos, but, there are dealers that repossess and then allow the customer to redeem. Right. And I hope that's true. I mean, I hope, I always had a practice as a dealer that I would always listen to any customer, no matter what the circumstances were. If they wanted to come and talk about the account, I would always,
open
listen.
Door.
Yeah. And have a conversation, hear what's going on. Doesn't mean that I'm going to agree to let them back in the car or agree to, do whatever they're asking for. But I would certainly make sure they, felt heard, that I heard the whole situation. And so that's kind of, I would hope that dealers would be prepared, because repossession is an unfortunate step that is sometimes required for enforcement, just simple enforcement, helping the customer be clear that this is something that we don't tolerate. And I'd like to see it obviously be consistent. We definitely emphasize consistency in everything, right? So we don't want to do, for one customer what we wouldn't do for another. But this thing we're talking about today is a really drastic step. And so you would want to confer with your attorney and make sure that you're okay to do this in certain situations. But I think we're also in dangerous waters, as I said, when we just make a decision to change practices on customers. And let's just think about, fairness is the biggest part of what way back for you and I talk a lot about the CFPB, but we don't talk about FDCPA, which is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So many decades ago, that came around. Well, fairness is the key word. They're asking us to be fair with consumers. And so when we change practices on them without notifying them that we're changing, that's unfair. Like that just strikes me as simply unfair. And so we have to, fulfill our responsibility, make the customer aware that we're shifting. And in my approach would be, this is a kind of last ditch effort. You don't have to use those words, but you can just basically say, we're prepared to release the car to you, but these are going to be the circumstances. It's going to be strict
You want me to bring
enforcement.
this up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So
I put some, it's a little difficult
it is
to
a
read
little
there.
difficult
We
to
don't have
read
a good
there.
way to zoom in on it, do we?
No,
'Cause
I don't. Not
I
on
didn't bring the
this.
device.
Okay.
But
So
basically
let's
that
just read
top
it.
section,
Yeah.
the top section, basically I put a big note in red there because any of you that are seeing the broadcast, and by the way, thanks for those who tune into the replay. We don't thank them enough, but we definitely know that more of you catch this thing in a replay situation. But the what it says there at the top is that this document
Okay, important note. This document is a serious legal has serious legal implications. The receiver of this form agrees to seek state-specific legal advice before issuing it to any account holders.
Okay. So then, you can read the language. And what I said that I combined two different documents into this one thing, because in my state, I was permitted to accelerate the note, but I had to make the customer aware that was going to be the practice. And so basically we were serving them notice and that we were going to start enforcing their contract strictly from that day forward. So you would have obviously whatever material or information you need at the top of the document to make sure that we're referring to this customer and this particular contract, and this is the status of the contract. And then it basically says we're going to have, I don't know if you can read that. I may have to grab the other device to be able to read it, but I can tell you the premise of the document. It basically says, from this day forward, we're serving you notice that we're going, regardless of our past practices, we're going to start enforcing the contract strictly from this day forward. So that just resets the clock, really. So there's a tricky thing, and again, we talked about this once before. If we can find the episode, we'll share it in the thread with where this broadcast goes out. But basically, when we have a practice of allowing a customer, like there's a history in their account that says we allowed them to pay 25 days late in the past, or whatever the history shows that we accepted a payment in the past at 25 days as an example. And now we're just frustrated for whatever reason. We made a policy change and we decided, like a lot of our dealers say, they're clamping down because of economic conditions. And if they start clamping down, now they repossess a customer who's only 20 days late. That's been 25 in the past. That's
a problem.
That's dangerous. That's really where you set a precedent in the past, and now you're stepping outside of that. And again, I'm going to just pause and say we're not attorneys. This is more operational advice. This is practical business advice, and it's about fairness. It's about just making sure it's all through a lens of being fair. And so when we do things like that that might be construed as unfair, we can solve that by just resetting the clock with this customer and saying, from this day forward, regardless of what our practice has been with you in the past, we're serving you notice that from this day forward, we're going to enforce the contract more strictly.
And then here's the thing, though, the kicker. Then you have to
do it. You have to do it.
Yeah, and it
just pollutes the whole thing. If don't, and I've had dealers where I had to really emphasize this: don't do it. Don't have them sign it unless you're prepared to enforce it exactly as it's written. Because you can imagine all it does is if you have the customer sign that, and then you don't enforce it in that way, what would you ever have them sign in the future that they would have any value to them?
Yeah,
That would have any
that
significance?
they would think really you meant it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because
Mhm.
this is serious stuff. If you do it, you got to be prepared to just enforce it exactly the way that, it's written. And
Mhm.
so, maybe you want to adjust the language. I can tell you with some of our clients in the past, I've adjusted the language. It says we require, instead of payment, that we require payment in full on time every time. You could just say we will not basically permit you to be past due in the future without having a signed, that's agreed by both parties.
Yeah.
So if we have a written understanding, that's fine.
And that is another thing that we since joining Jim, it's like it's verbal understandings. Yeah, you want to keep everything in writing as
Let's
much
write
as you
that
can.
one down too, because
Written
that's another
understanding.
topic to bring back, because we see that a ton of people do it. And they're just verbal agreements over the phone and put a note in the system. And we just know, those of us who've been around this thing for a long time, we just know that
Mhm.
traditionally has not been as effective as putting something in writing. And in this day and
Mhm.
age, it's so easy to sign something on a smartphone, and
Yeah, it really is. And I know for some people it's like, well, I don't want to pay the thing. Like if you have DocuSign or if you have whatever, and it's like
you're paying a different
you're
price.
paying a different, yeah, and it actually, again, not an attorney, but if you have something in writing, imagine when it's like they signed that they were going to do this, they signed that they were going to strict compliance, they
Mhm.
signed all the stuff.
Yeah, they
How
have to sign this one. I mean, that we can't
Yeah,
start to enforce that unless they've
yeah.
signed it or otherwise
But I
been
mean,
served
it's even
notice.
like for a extension, or for, I can't make my payment this month, so I'm going to do one of, an extra $200 next payment and another $200 the following payment.
Yeah.
Having those things in writing, it also, I don't know about you, but it's one thing to talk on the phone, and it's another thing when you have a piece of paper or something
Mhm.
that it's like, I'm signing this, and
Yeah.
it's a real, it just makes it that much more, remember,
Sure.
stick to it. This is
Yeah.
this is a thing.
Just quickly, I would acknowledge the remark somebody said might have to go back to field calls. Be very careful about that. My understanding is, since I was a dealer, we did field calls plenty, but my understanding is that
I don't know if they're
that's
talking
changed.
about football or this, because I don't know. Yeah,
They were talking about
they were talking
visits
about.
in the field.
Oh, okay,
Some
gotcha.
people call it door knocking, or visiting,
Mhm.
field visits. It's like basically going out, and I'm like, if it's lawful in your area,
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in it. If it's done in the spirit of finding the customer,
And having a
reaching a resolution,
conversation.
and
Mhm.
find out what's going on and solving
Yeah.
problems. And
But when it's about puffing yourself up,
yeah,
and, you're taking the cart, and that just creates conflict. And that's one of the reasons why we really encourage people to use a good repo
hmm,
agency.
sure,
There are some out there that we've heard that it's like they get the key every
right,
time.
right,
It's just they know how to handle the going up to the door and, I need to get the
yeah,
key for the thing,
sure.
and all of that. But
Yeah, and I
yeah.
would say we can go back to the document if you can show it. I'd say that the other piece that we didn't really speak to on that document is that it says it's called a notice of strict compliance and intent to accelerate. So that's the part that was for the second form that was combined into one, because that's another topic for us, Michelle, is like,
Mhm.
this thing about when a customer, there are actually a couple things around repossession that we're going to need to visit. One is going to be inventory of personal belongings. People are talking about that and they think they're covered, and it
Yeah.
doesn't sound to me like they're covered. So we've got to definitely talk about that one going forward. We probably should bring an attorney in on that one. And then there's just some things around repossession here. But on this notice, when we say intent to accelerate, we're basically serving the customer notice that if this doesn't work, our strict compliance or strict enforcement of the contract going forward, that we could repossess the car. And if we do, we're calling the note due in full. So we wrapped it into the same understanding, because excuse me, we have to be aware that we're typically not permitted to do that. And again, we're not trying to be attorneys over here, but we are trying to offer you enough operational heads up to keep yourself out of hot water,
Yeah.
because we typically, when we have a customer repossess, if they can cure the default, and I'm really uncomfortable in talking about this stuff because this is definitely very legal. Some of these things are federal, some are state. This is why we can't be sure. And Michelle and I are very careful to always tell, all of our clients, look, we don't do state specific, we don't do legal. That's just not something we attempt to try to keep up with, because
reach out to your state organization and your national organization if you can't get a hold of anybody at your state organization.
Yeah. By the way, I'm going to use the opportunity to ask. I've been seeking on behalf of, I've got 3 people that chimed in after I made a remark on Facebook a week or so ago. I've had people reach out saying, are you aware of fractional legal solutions in our particular industry? And I'm if somebody knows a firm that will do that, I'm contacting the firms that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
And but if you know somebody that does that, please let me know, because we've got a number of people that are seeking, kind of fractional solutions on legal, which I think makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think, especially when you've got these things that are state specific, then you got to be careful about those pieces. And so there's just a ton wrapped up in all of this. When you're talking about repossessions, you're talking about allowing a customer to redeem, you've got inventory of belongings, you're talking about changing practices on the customer in mid-contract. And so these are serious matters. And so we want to make sure that, people have enough information. And so I'll make this form available. Just, you can message us in this thread. You can send a private message to me. I think most everybody knows how to find me. We can put my phone number up there too, Michelle, if you don't mind, so that you can also just text us and let us know, if you'd like to have the form.
That would be 903-816-0216.
Yeah, for those that are listening on audio only. But yeah, the idea with the form is just to have a way to bring things to an end, give the customer a chance to, the language, I never said this with a customer, but the language I could kind of use in training was, we're going to give the customer a chance to straighten up and fly right. Like, we're going to give them an opportunity to save the accounts, spare themselves the repossession. We're going to give them a chance to prove that they can, follow through. And people ask, I might as well answer. Like, I would guess, just this anecdotal, I don't have any data, but I would just guess that of the ones that I wrote in my own dealership, something less than half, probably more than 25%, less than 50%, actually were able to follow through on this.
Well, that saves half of the people that would, you would normally, like, I'm at my end of being flexible.
Well, and on the ones who didn't, at least I could feel good knowing I gave them every opportunity to get with the program and do what was expected. And so that's, part of what we're trying to do there. But, again, it's just kind of tricky legal stuff. So we want to make sure people, get out there and find a good attorney. And we'll also have in mind, by the way, if somebody knows somebody, I used to know a guy who, may he rest in peace. There was a gentleman who was a really well-known national attorney who was a bankruptcy specialist. And I'm hearing that bankruptcies are up. And so we'd like to bring somebody also to the broadcast who's a specialist in bankruptcy. So if you are aware of an attorney that, has that particular, bankruptcy is generally federal. I think there can be some jurisdictional things associated with that, but most bankruptcy law is federal. So if we can find somebody who can come join the show and talk to us about, some top tips, best practices
for those on the other side of a bankruptcy.
Yeah, for those who, for the dealer creditors is what I'm thinking. For those who are dealer creditors who find themselves have customers filing bankruptcy, and so we have, you and I see it. There's so many dealers out there on Facebook asking questions because they're just new and they don't know this stuff, and they don't. I'm afraid they're going to step on a landmine
and just
So we're just trying to obviously help solve as much of that as we can, but. Anyway,
okay,
I think we should let folks get back to
I think we should get
Monday.
Get back to your Monday. I hope you have a great week. Wednesday is White Hat Wednesday. I have a topic in mind. I wrote it down while we were talking, and I'll talk to Jim.
And listen, if you haven't found us on YouTube yet, jump over there and subscribe. Please like the
Jim
video
Rhoads,
that you watch and give us a review over on the podcast channel.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.